Joining us now via telephone, Michael Cutler, a former INS officer who testified before the 9/11 Commission and who I got to know during my days in Congress in the wake of those 9/11 attacks. Michael, it's good to have you back here on America's Forum. So the House has taken a fairly strong stand. What do you expect in the Senate?
Well, thanks for having me. I expect that we're going to see more of the same, a lot of posturing about the president's, what I believe, illegal executive orders. But here's the problem, J.D., and this is something that no one's talking about, especially the Republican Party. They're quick to point out how the president's actions undermines the Constitution and our rule of law. But nobody is talking about how this undermines national security. And that's really the issue. And this idea that we're going to somehow give millions of people identity documents when they ran our borders, this terminology of undocumented is really not accurate. It's that they entered without inspection. And that was the term we used as immigration agents. We used the three-letter initial, EWI, to describe such aliens. Who on earth would trust somebody who snuck into your country because we'd have no way of knowing who they are or when they got here or why they came? So the point for the Republicans, I believe, is to deliver up for their contributors cheap labor and all those folks that help them generate business. But at the same time, this is undermining American workers. We're coming up on the birthday of Martin Luther King. If you look at the cost that the American minorities, especially, are paying in the labor force, it's stunning. If you believe that giving millions of aliens authority to work is helpful to American workers, then you believe that the guy that puts cheese on a mousetrap is trying to feed hungry mice.
So how successful do you think the new Congress will be at blocking the president's actions?
Well, I'm hopeful that they will be, but my problem is what will they replace it with? They still want to accomplish the same things that the president wants, so they're getting a benefit from Obama. This is a gift. They can scream and rant and rave about how he's violating the Constitution, but at the same time, by allowing all those people in, the people making those deep-pocketed campaign contributions are getting exactly what they want. I think they're going to defeat him on these executive measures, but the question is what happens when the smoke settles, the dust settles, where will we be then? What's needed as far as immigration is concerned isn't so much a revamping of the laws, but of going back to the basic premise that for America to do well, Americans must do well, and we're not hearing that from either party leadership. Am I right?
Well, Michael, I will tell you, I've been there and I've studied and I've been back to the Hill to talk about this very subject, and there is grave concern that the establishment sectors in both parties, the business as usual gang, will continue despite the clear and apparent dangers and despite some events. However, what has happened in the past, Michael, is we have seen events intrude and stop amnesty plans hatched in Congress.
Yes.
Now, with what happened last week in Paris, will the American people mobilize to the point that their representatives and senators will go, they're reminding us again that border security is national security, and will this again, outside events, put the brakes on the D.C. designs to move forward with amnesty?
Well, only the people watching this program can answer that question. I hope so. What I found interesting was that Dianne Feinstein, who chaired the Senate Intelligence Committee, and she has been repeatedly talking about how the risk of terrorism is greater now than since any time, even before 9/11, has come out and taken the position on the visa waiver program. And this was one of the cornerstones of my testimony. And I've done this at 16 other congressional hearings before the Senate and before the House. The idea of allowing aliens into the country without visas is dangerous. On 9/11, we had 26 visa waiver countries. We are now up to 38. This is because the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, partnering with the hotel, hospitality, and travel industries, are pushing this. But by admitting that the visa waiver program, in the words of Feinstein, is the Achilles heel of America's national security, well, guess what? She's acknowledging that it's not just the U.S.-Mexican border that needs to be addressed. It's the entire enforcement mechanism of the immigration system, and that really should be the starting point. There should be no discussions about immigration reform without going back to the 9/11 Commission findings and recommendations. That should be the starting point. Don't you agree?
Michael, quick question for you, though, because a lot of people, well, this isn't a quick question, but a lot of people have been arguing about immigration for quite some time, mainly because people say it's not realistic to deport 5 million people. So is there a compromise that can finally be reached?
You know what? We don't enforce any law but for a tiny fraction. How many people speed and get away with it? How many people blow stop signs and get away with it? Does anybody recommend changing the motor vehicle law to get rid of the stop signs? When drunk driving became an issue, when texting by motorists became an issue, nobody stood up and said, gee whiz, there's too many people with cell phones and driver's licenses for us to be able to address it. You enforce the law as effectively as you can. You launch a massive advertising campaign, and you convince those people who would contemplate violating the law, convince them that we're serious. Chuck Schumer, the architect of amnesty, has said that we have to go after the people who trespass on public buildings in the United States, especially the landmarks in New York. He called for raising the penalties from a year in jail, which is what it is in New York City now, to 5 years in jail. He said enforcement is the way you deter illegal activity. Why then is it that when people trespass on America, Chuck Schumer turns around and says, well, we should give them a path to citizenship? The guy lacks mouth-ear coordination. It's not hard. Get more people enforcing the laws. Make it clear that if you're here illegally, we're not going to give you the ability to operate normally.
And
I
Michael
believe a lot
Cutler,
of people will go home.
that's right, Michael Cutler, the bottom line on this is simply the observation: when the laws are enforced, people obey the laws, or they respond in a way to remove themselves from being subject to those laws. Obviously, this discussion will continue. As always, Michael, we appreciate your input, and America's Forum will continue after this Newsmax Now update.